Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight for the November meeting of the Big Hole Watershed Committee. I'm Tana Lynch. I'm the Associate Director, and we will start out with introductions.
I'm Nolan Salix. I'm the Restoration Specialist for Big Hole Watershed Committee.
I'm Carly Natzel, and I'm the Communications Specialist for the Big Hole Watershed.
Luke Lutz, Montana DNRC.
Me, I talked to.
If you want to.
No, that's fine. I thought.
Yeah.
Official people.
No.
No, you're official.
Yeah, I think it's rather overlooked, but I understand.
That's not true.
Kempf, Dana Miller.
Elston,
Roy Morris, George Grant.
Bob Bowler from Butte. Andy Bowler, Butte.
I'm Ciara Kempf, I'm a historian from Anaconda.
And Ayme Swartz, archaeologist out of Butte.
All right, and we do have some people on Zoom. Pedro, Steve, Annika with the NRC, and a couple other people. So thank you so much for joining us on Zoom. And we will go next to the stream flow and snowpack update from Luke Lutz.
So I'm Luke Lutz, Montana DNRC, I'm the hydrologist. I'm gonna go over this month, just a recap of the water year, for those who don't know. Water years run from October 1st to September 30th every year, so we're in a new water year. As of October 1st, I'm gonna do a recap of last year, and then also try to compare with some recent drought conditions with previous drought conditions the last 5 years or so. This is the Stage Explorer website right here. This is all the Montana DNRC gauges we have on the Big Hole. Some of these are real-time sites, the blue ones, and this is an updated one. So we now have that real-time site at the Big Hole battlefield up there. It's now on. So I'm gonna start off with just general snowpack. This is all in snow water equivalent from 2021 to 2025. And right off the bat, these yellow bars are May 1's SWE, the blue bars are peak SWE, and the red bars are SWE at median snowpack date. For the Big Hole, this is April 17th. 2021 and 2025, you can tell at a glance they're pretty similar. In 2024, we were much lower overall in snowpack. 2022 and 2023 are pretty normal snow years, and peak SWE. If you look at the graph itself, peak SWE, we're always losing peak SWE by the time we get to our median snowpack date. But actually look at the bottom here, I got that table. 2022 and 2023, we actually gained more snow after that peak SWE date. So it flaws that. And 2021 and 2025, we peaked early, first week of April. Yeah, any questions on this at all? Okay. Now I got some hydrographs. They're busy, and I'm sorry if you struggle with the colors. This is the wisdom gauge, USGS gauge, 2021, 24, and 25. These are probably the most recent drought years we had in the last 5 years. 2024, we actually had a pretty big, short duration peak, but a fairly decent peak at around 1160. Those low flows. We hit about 2.1 CFS this year for a few days. And this red line right here, 2025, no really significant peak. The biggest difference between 2025 and 2021 here at the wisdom gauge is see 2021 right around that end of May and early June, the flow just completely dropped and never recovered. Compared to 2025, we had these little pulses. 2025 was a little bit more wetter than 2021, if anybody remembers that. So that's the biggest difference between that gauge. That table on the bottom right, the days below 20 CFS, that's just what the drought plan has for full river closure for section 1. 2021, 104 days, and then right around 60 and 69 for 24 and 25. This is at Melrose. I didn't do Glen, I just did Melrose. I included 2023. It's a little bit slightly above average water year, but it really shows the dress comparison between these last few drought years in 2023. You know, 2023, we peaked around 5,500 CFS, and 21 to 25, we're around 3,200 CFS for that peak. We got down to 131 CFS this year as the low, and 16 days, which is actually less, or sorry, it's more than 2021, under 150 CFS. All good there. And I added a tributary. This is our DNRC gauge at Deep Creek of Wide River. Pretty big difference here. 2023, we had a much higher peak, and actually the duration of the peak was quite a bit longer, which is what you typically want to see in a hydrograph. It's pretty standard. You have a receding limb going down in the base flow. You can tell in these drought years, there's a lot more variability. The peak isn't really consistent. We have a much sharper drop in our recession line here after snow is melting out. 18 CFS for this stream. The reason I think that's the upper incipient, or sorry, not the upper incipient, it's the anyways, that's just a characterization of the stream that's best described for adequate flow for fish health and fish reproduction for macroinvertebrates. 2024, 2025, we're definitely a lot more days under 18 than 2021. Any questions here? Okay. And this is the figure I really want to hit home on. This is a Palmer hydrological drought index, and this does a really good job at showing the compounding effects and recovery from drought conditions. This index, this is just for Beaver Head County, and this goes back to 1988, and this index includes soil moisture, precipitation, snowpack, and air temperature, evapotranspiration rates. So it's a good visual to see where all these factors coming together when we talk about drought as a whole. You see that black line right there? That is a value of negative 3.11. If you look on the table on the right there, normal conditions would be represented at 0 because it is an index. And then as you go down, mild, moderate, severe, and extreme. This is negative 3.11 is what the river or drought conditions were in 1988 when the Big Old River at Wisdom went dry. As a lot of people from this room probably know. And you can see in the early 2000s there, and then more recently, we've been hitting that threshold quite a bit more frequently. Bottom right table there, those are the this is only for July, by the way. This year we hit negative 5.27. Anything under negative 4 is considered extreme drought conditions. And I also want to point out here, we remember 2023 as a really good water year. And, you know, we started off in 2021 with a negative 5, and that water year only brought us back up to about a negative 2, which is still a moderate drought. So it's a really good visual to see that just because we have a good water year in there, drought conditions can still persist. We need to have that compounding effects of drought really matter when we talk about this fact. Another cool thing to look at here is 2020, we were about 0, which is near normal conditions. And we shot straight down to negative 5 in just 1 year. So that really shows how bad 2020 was. We were negative 5 this year in 2025, but you can see that's just probably a lot of that is just from 2024 being so dry. If you remember that snowpack graph I showed on that first slide, and then the current conditions adding on to that this previous year. So is there any questions on this?
Next year's not gonna look real great, just because of where we're at right now.
Yeah, hopefully I'll have some better news here. Yeah, any questions at all? This is the end of the drought conditions and water year recap. Yep. There are more. So this is, like I said, we're in a new water year, starting October 1st. So we're in water year 2026. And so we know it's been pretty dry lately and warm. We're sitting at 34% basin index according to the National Water and Climate Center. This is from the Montana Climate Office. It's another standardized SWE drought index, say we're about 5% of normal as of this date. Figure on the right there is Ipsami SWE. This is essentially the volume of snow dispersed at certain elevations. Median snow right now is right around 9,000 feet, and most of that snow isn't really sticking until it hits about 8,000 feet. Yeah. Precipitation's been fairly okay, most of it's been in rain, 88% for the basin-wide precipitation basin index. This is also that National Water and Climate Center. This is the NOAA 2-week forecast. Our warm temperature's been done by a Chinook that came out of the north, and that's caused some instability. And that's gonna also flip a bunch of cold air back down starting probably next week. So this is the 2-week outlook, below average temperatures and above average precipitation for our region. This is actually probably gonna persist even longer, probably gonna persist for about a month, according to the NOAA climate models. Seasonal forecast looks pretty similar, equal chances to below average chances of temperature for the season. This is valid to February 2026, and then above average for precipitation. We're currently in La Nina conditions, and they're going to probably continue until between January and March 2026, and there's a 61% chance that we transition to Enso neutral. Enso neutral just means we're probably going to transition to normal like conditions, and that's a 61% chance somewhere between January and March. This is the most recent U.S. drought monitor map. It's released on the 13th of November. There's actually been some improvement. We were D2 last time I presented this, so according to the U.S. drought monitor, we are improving slightly in the intensity of this. So, any questions at all?
Thanks, Luke.
Thanks.
Hey, Joe, are you with us to do your director report? Yes,
I am, yeah, are you hearing me okay with this headphone?
Thank you very well.
You can hear me fine? Okay, great. Cool, yeah, I am ready to go. Tana, if you don't mind, I'm gonna share my screen.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. Oh. How's that?
Good.
Got it? Okay. Hi, everybody. This will be my last virtual presentation. Look forward to being back in Montana, January 5th. And yeah, just starting with, I don't know, sometimes you just Google earthing around the big hole and you just find a stunning just little image. So I'll start with that. And then let's see. Okay, there we go. I guess I'll start off my talk on more of a somber note. As you all know, Kim Giannoni stepped in big time for us. She was studying at U Western, and this winter when Tana was on maternity leave and I was out here before we had hired our new staff, KG stepped up so big for us. She's super enthusiastic about the work that we do and was gung-ho about figuring out a way to get her schoolwork lined up with some of the stuff that we were doing. And then unfortunately, health problems came on strong and she has not been able to kick them at all. And it's been back and forth for most of the year with her between hospitals. And just this month, we found out that she has just gone into hospice and is at home. I don't have any updates as of for the last couple of weeks, but it sounds like she's just at home and trying to get comfortable and is on her way to other places. So just if anyone that knows her could reach out over Facebook, Instagram, just let her know. I've let her know how much we appreciated her here at the Watershed Committee. So I just wanted to make sure folks knew and send her well wishes. She was definitely I had personally great conversations. She her conversations with me really inspired me to keep going a couple times, just in her enthusiasm and understanding of the complexity and difficulty of the work that we do for the watershed. So it's a little bit of a sad development for us here.
Hard.
You do? Thank you, Tana. That's wonderful. On the funding side of things, there's no way to transition out of that. We'll segue just roughly. On the positive side of things, found out this morning that the first grant that Carly wrote for us successfully came in. So we reached out to the Charlotte Martin Foundation to add some educational and outreach work to our beaver transplant and just general beaver related restoration in the watershed. And so we got some money for that, and that's 100% track record. Way to get out of the gate. So super stoked for Carly to have a win so quick, and bringing a whole new foundation into the fold for us is just awesome. Tomorrow, I will be submitting a proposal from us to the Natural Resource Damage Program, just to get us on their list of NGO partners that can help them. We are staying strictly tied to the Anaconda uplands and the Anaconda county lands relating to steep slope uplands work, where we have some particular expertise. We're not branching out anywhere beyond that, because the NRD work really is focused in the Clark Fork watershed. Obviously, the Mount Hagen uplands come over into the Big Hole side. So that'll be turned in tomorrow. It's basically done. I got one more little thing to do, but I've been in transit all day today. It's been a little bit crazy. On letters of support and other activities going on, we sent in a note to FWPs in support of their beaver translocation environmental assessments. As I've said before, we will be one of the 4 pilot locations for Montana's first beaver translocations. Nolan's been up in the Moose Creek area quite a bit, prepping for that work. We've started with some labor crews. The Nature Conservancy is really the coordinating arm for us, but we've been on the ground on this project for a couple years, and we'll stay engaged there. That'll be a really exciting project that's going to keep growing. You'll keep hearing more about it. Western is, we've been talking to the professors there for a long time, and I'm really excited about the direction that they're taking. They're looking to open the Land, Water, and Sky Center, which is, I think they're really taking seriously as an academic institution the need to connect the academic work that they're doing with on the ground work that's going on. And so this center is really going to be the way that they build that bridge with organizations like ours. And Nolan put together a letter supporting that initiative. We're going to take advantage of that a lot. There's a lot of great things we can do, pointing students to work that we've done and having them pull down aerial imagery. And there's all kinds of data sets available that folks can put to work to start quantifying the impact of the work we do on the ground. And a lot of times our staff just doesn't have the time to do it ourselves. We're so busy just actually trying to get the work done, writing our reports, that the research part of things and the monitoring sometimes slips to second tier of importance. And so having an entire university program looking at some of the issues that are important to us is just fantastic. In particular, so that's the big blue box there, all of the different areas of inquiry that they have expertise and professors ready to dive students into. So lots of good things to come out of that. And Nolan was he was associated with the university there, knows everybody. So that's going to be a great relationship to build on. And Tana went there as well for her master's. So we're all kinds of connected. We also wrote a letter of support for Trout Unlimited's Alder Creek project to connect, really to change some irrigation so that Alder Creek can flow completely into the Big Hole, and irrigation would be taken out of the Big Hole instead of Alder Creek. So that's similar to Johnson Creek, on the same property, same landowner, and we're doing a revegetation project for them as well. So Lots of good activity going on in the Wise River area. And then two other things that we will be keeping our eye on right now, not completely engaged in. The first is an exempt well lawsuit. So the Montana Farm Bureau joined the Clark Fork Coalition, Trout Unlimited, and a host of organizations that are suing the state, the DNRC, on their exempt wells policy, basically the allowing developers to drill multiple wells for a development project and calling it one exempt well. I'm not going to speak too much on it because I really don't understand the issue in that great of depth, but I think the cumulative impact of continuously drawing groundwater for development obviously impacts working lands, it impacts ranches, it impacts senior water right holders. If you start popping as many straws as you want into the ground to drink up the groundwater, that's going to get felt by other water users. I understand this lawsuit is an attempt to halt that practice. It's really a loophole that has been exploited by developers for quite a while. And it's a really interesting coalition of folks that have gotten together to try to put the brakes on that. So we'll stay on top of that and keep reporting it out here to the Watershed Committee. And then I just found out, this is just a day or two ago, but a company called Almonte, I think they're Canadian, has purchased the rights to a tungsten mine. This is in, I believe it's Rock Creek on the Eastern Pioneers. It is between, I'm just pulling the map up now. This is all kind of news, between Lake Agnes and Browns Lake. And this is a pretty big mining operation that they're hoping to get off the ground by next year. And I've just had a data drop of documents and related news about this. I'm not going to try to read it on the fly here, but I'll keep you all posted on what that is all about. No, I don't have any assessment of what's going on, but obviously BLM has to go through NEPA process. So project is in its infancy, but will be good to just keep track of that. Obviously, mining creates jobs, harvest resources. They could be really important. And we also have been involved with the mining sites. We'll hear about one of them later today, and they can kind of leave a mess behind depending on how it goes. Okay. Moving on, just something that caught my eye. I just thought I'd put it out here. I was looking into, this concept of water and green and blue water, I thought was just a really good way to think about evapotranspiration and groundwater versus surface water. And as I was looking into this, image popped up for me, and what struck me is that when we did studies of the Big Hole, we found that about 70% of all of the precipitation is used by plants. And so that would be green water, and it mimics what this graph is showing here about precipitation and the consumptive use of water. Really, most of it is going to plants in the watershed. And to me, what this really shows is the size of the consumption that forests use in a landscape. And it really supports the idea that managing our forests and keeping them in check and not letting them expand and get more dense does have a big impact on our downstream water availability. If you look at return flows and what that is as a percentage of all of the precip that hits the landscape, that's pretty interesting. And so these authors have also gotten into describing water as blue-green water and silver-green water and silver-blue water, depending on where it is in the cycle and what's using it. Just thought I'd throw that out there. It's an interesting way to think of and conceive of these sometimes complicated concepts. And I think Carly's going to be maybe massaging and working on this type of language and some of these visuals to help tell the story of the work that we do and where the water is on the landscape. Jumping over to our restoration projects, this hasn't really changed much since last month. I'm not gonna go through one by one. I wanna leave as much time as possible. Happy to talk about any of these projects or answer any questions folks have. Jump between these and those. And okay, lastly, to jump to the specifics of a particular project, this is the Elkhorn mine. We'll hear a lot more about the Coolidge site here in just a little bit. So I want to get out of Amy's way as fast as possible. We just got designs for the mill building, as I've spoken about in the past. To get to the dirty dirt that's under the mill building, we have to shore up the structure of the concrete pillars that are holding that building up. One wrong move from an excavator could potentially collapse that building. There's some piers that are structurally not okay. On the top left here, you have a general location of the ghost town site and Elkhorn mine. Bottom left is a front view of the columns and what we're proposing. Pioneer Technical has drawn these up. And I'll give you one more. Here's a close-up detail of what they're talking about. It's really just metal jackets going on top of these columns to hold them together, basically. So then they'll be structurally sound. And then we can proceed to the next phase. And that, I think, is all I got. Yep, that's what I got for today. Any questions?
Questions? All right, then we will hear from the steering committee next. Dean, Roy, since Steve's on Zoom. Anybody?
The only thing I have is. I went to a meeting a week or so ago with the CBA, they're calling it now. The CCAA is changing its name to the CBA.
Oh,
CCAA was a 20-year agreement. The new agreement's gonna be a 50-year agreement, which is good. That's part of the, help me out if I get this wrong, that's part of the portion of the lawsuit where we paid. Correct. Can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, so, yeah, CCAs were made just to essentially protect species from becoming an endangered species. And then there was also a safe harbor program. Those were to help recover species who were on an Endangered Species Act. They're operated similar, and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service is the one who gives out these permits. So for the Arctic grayling, in this case, the big hole, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service offers a permit, and the current permit holder right now is FWP, so that's who runs the CCA program. It expires in 2026. The lawsuit, there's like 18 points that the litigants brought up, and we lost on 2. One was, there was no certainty that the CCA was going to be extended, and then 2 is the Ruby River population, which is that it's actually been abandoned really for recovery, and we're trying to focus on our core populations. Those were only 2 that we lost on. Anyways, the CBA is a combination of both the CCA and the safe harbor agreement, so it extends both boundaries of before a species becomes an endangered and when a species is already endangered. And then we're extending that to 50 years instead of 20. Really show that landowners who are enrolled in the program are on board, and it's a big commitment from all federal and state agencies to understand the work that we're doing. Give them up.
What does CPA?
Conservation benefit agreement.
Very positive step in the process, the way I see it. That's all I have. Maybe Roy has something.
Does this make it less likely it's gonna get listed?
It should help.
Should help.
It helps, yeah. I mean, there's so many other factors that go into these lawsuits, you know, but like I said, there's 18 points that were brought up. In the last finding and the lawsuit, a big part of the reason why they weren't listed is because of the CCA program. And it's say like one of the more successful CCAs in the country.
Yeah.
So that's a big part of why they are. I don't think, yeah.
Okay.
It's a big deal.
Cool.
The only thing I'd say, is it look like you're gonna get more water. That's,
We were getting it all the way here. It snowed on me all the way. Yeah, until I come out of the canyon right here.
it was just you too, until we got that spot.
This is. It's still on your screen, Pedro. Um, Oh, there we go. Okay. All right, so the wildlife and communications report, we'll start with communications. The main thing I wanted to highlight for you guys was to check out our Shopify store that Carly set up. If you haven't yet, you can find it on our website. It's at bhmc.org/shop to support. And you can get all kinds of branded HWC gear. We've got a lot of cool stuff on there. And it's of course the Big Hole Conservation Fund. So please check that out. So last week I spoke on a panel for the Conflict Reduction Consortium's annual meeting at Western and Dillon. And then Chet, our range rider, and I both attended a range riding workshop at Western. I just went on November 14th for the in-class session. He also went for the field portion on Friday. It was put on by the Western Landowners Alliance and Ray Nickerson with the Utah State University. She's a PhD student. It was really interesting. And Chet he wasn't officially a part of the panel, but they invited him up and he pretty much ended up being on all of the panels throughout the day. And they've now asked him to travel around several Western states and speak at these workshops with the rest of the panel that does that. Super awesome. We're very supportive of that. As long as he remembers to put on his time sheet. His Chet loves his job so much he actually likes to work for free, and I have to remind him to not do that. Go there. All right. Next big thing is our annual drought review meeting. This is coming up on January 26th at Fairmont Hot Springs Resort. We'll be reviewing and potentially updating the Big Hole River Drought Management Plan like we do every year. We do have a drought subcommittee that's made up of irrigators and agency personnel and other folks. But if anybody else would like to attend, just let me know. We can accommodate you there. And then as far as, okay, so wildlife. As far as funding, we're doing great in the wildlife world right now. We've got $8,500 that we secured from the Livestock Loss Board for next year, as well as a $194,000 grant that goes over the course of 3 years through I've got two FWP logos through the Heart of the Rockies Initiative and Fish, Wildlife and Parks. So these grants fund our wildlife programs, which includes our range rider program and a carcass removal and composting program that we manage in the Upper Big Hole. And then we also we distribute some bear resistant trash cans and do some educational events. So that's a big boost for us. And then we've also brought in $2,300 in donations toward our four-wheeler. So this year we purchased a new four-wheeler for our range rider program. And as it turned out, neither of these grant sources would pay for a four-wheeler. So we've been soliciting donations for that. It was $8,000 and we're actually up to, I think we're actually up to 2,800. So we're almost halfway there. So that's been great. If you'd like to contribute, you can donate via our website or you can send us a check. And then as far as our programs go, so our range rider program runs July 1st through September 30th. And this year we added 2 new allotments to the program. We are building capacity, so we're sending Chet to those workshops. He said he actually learned a lot, which he wasn't surprised. I was a little surprised because he's been doing this job since 2010, but there's always room to learn and improve. And then we're assessing producer needs for possible expansion throughout the watershed. So if you're having any problems with wildlife conflict, please reach out to me and we'll see what we can do. And then our carcass removal and composting program, unfortunately, we call him a wildlife program technician, but our compost site manager and driver resigned, and so we are hiring for that position. It's a pretty unique job, so it's part-time, February through June. And you drive typically a dump truck around the upper big hole and pick up dead cows, potentially horses, sheep, other livestock. We are looking to pay up to $50 an hour for that. And right, as of right now, we're looking for somebody with the CDL, but we're also looking at ways to get around the CDL. Like, we might end up getting a lift trailer if somebody had a truck they could pull it with. So if you're interested, reach out to me, email, phone, or just come find me. And yeah, hoping to find somebody. We typically do carcass removal in the spring, so we're hoping to find somebody before that. And we do that to remove attractant from the landscape so that wolves and bears are not being drawn in to feed on these carcasses and then potentially killing healthy livestock or being a risk for human safety. So that's all I have. Any questions?
We're not going up to Lima Dell anymore picking up carcasses.
Well, we didn't last year because we had a issue with the dump truck. We weren't able to get it back from Red Rocks. And the truck that we had, Justin didn't think was, I don't know if it was too slow.
No.
Or just because it doesn't look.
I know.
Yeah.
Car transport, so it's hard to get stuff to come off there unless you go before them.
Oh, so I think so the Dell carcasses go to the Beaver Head County landfill, so probably the issue is there's no way to get them off at the landfill. So, because he could scrape them off at our compost site with the loader that we borrowed, but we didn't want to bring
So the
cows
future,
from Sage Creek into there.
we come all the way down to Divide.
We
Pick
can-
up carcasses and in the future, do we plan, I'm just looking at the job and who might do it. and
Yeah,
how far
it
they
started
gotta
as the upper big hole, but as far as we're concerned, anywhere in the big hole watershed that's accessible it's fair game. Yeah, Dee, if you could think of anybody, that'd be great. Justin said he asked around a little bit and couldn't find
travel.
anybody
Yeah, talk to him a little bit.
interested, so. I don't really know anyone wisdom to do. Yeah, if you think of anybody, definitely send them my way. Questions?
Is the composting site, is that?
It is 2 miles outside of Wisdom on 278.
I know it is,
Right
okay.
next to
that's
the
okay.
Montana Department of Transportation.
Yeah.
So the job involves driving the truck to go get the carcasses, bringing them back to our site, and then getting them off the truck, covering with wood chips and water, and then that breaks the carcasses down into basically soil and bones.
So if we switch to a dump trailer, we would ask them to use their own vehicle, would they, then we would pay mileage, I would assume.
Yeah, we would pay mileage, and I think there's some flexibility there, whether they wanted to be an employee and then we pay the mileage, or if they could be a contractor and they could charge a hauling rate.
And the $50 an hour would, if you had a CDL, I assume.
Well,
That's what it takes to get someone with CDL.
yeah,
basically.
yeah. That's what we're looking at right now, of course. I'm working to see if I can get that dump truck back from Red Rocks too. I'm not sure if that's gonna be a possibility. So if anybody had their own dump truck, that would be good too, but that's probably a lot to ask. I don't know how many people are around with the dump truck and free time to pick up dead cows, but you never know. All right, anything else, Renee? All right, then. Oh, are any new topics anybody wants to discuss before I take a break? No, all right, let's take a quick break. I'll take out 20 minutes and come back at 7. Now for our main presentation, we're hearing from Ayme Swartz and Ciara. Say that right? Okay, about the Coolidge ghost town.
Yeah, all right, thank you guys, and Pedro, thank you for inviting me here. My name is Ayme Swartz. I am the forest archaeologist for the Beaverhead Deer Lodge National Forest. Tonight, I'm up here as a private citizen doing this because I too do my job for basically, I would do it for no money. We don't tell the government that because they did that to us here a minute ago, but a few years ago, when I first stepped into this position, I think I was in my new role as the Heritage Program Manager for maybe 2 months. And it was the first time that there had been a Heritage Program Manager on the Beaverhead Deer Lodge in 20 years. And it was actually the last time that Coolidge was being worked on for the remediation. And I got together with Pedro and then with our regional office environmental engineer, his name is Sunny Thornwell. And they said, we're doing this project, we have a lot of money, we need to clean up this dirty dirt, I think somebody called it, and I really liked that. And I said, yeah, this sounds great, let's take a trip up there and tell me what you guys have in mind. And they say, this giant waste rock pile here, that's contaminated and like it's leaking all into the water system and it's gonna go into the river and then it's going into the Butte water supply and it's really wreaking havoc, but we know we can't touch it. And I said, why in the heck can't you touch it? And he said, there was archaeologists that said it's an archaeological feature. It's part of that 2008 National Register of Historic Places archaeological site. And I said, oh no, that's not how it works. We never say no, especially to circle projects. I said, but what we do is we do mitigation. And that opened up this whole brand new conversation that got everybody so darn excited. And so we started talking about if we do remove an archaeological feature, we are altering an archaeological site and we are taking away something that can never be brought back. Sadly, like I talk about this all the time when we have our NEPA projects, like I wish we could bring back stuff like we do with endangered species, but we just can't. We cannot bring these things back. And, but what we can do is we can interpret them and we can make them more accessible for the public. We can bring more people to the site to protect it. This opens up a whole new ballgame. And I said, like, that costs a lot of money. And like for archaeologists, we never have money. We are always working on a shoestring budget. And usually we are using equipment from 1972 because that's the last time that Heritage had money. And these guys are like, oh, don't worry about it, we got money. And I didn't know what to do. I had no idea what to do. And so here I'm thinking like, oh, let's just make this little trail. And they're like, no, let's do a boardwalk. And I'm like, yeah, like you're talking money. We got some money for this. All right. And it might not be a lot of money in your guys' eyes, but that's a heck of a lot to us. So we'll go ahead and switch the slide here. And yeah, so as right now, we have that mill area closed, like Pedro was talking about. They are working on that mill building site and it's pretty dangerous and there's contaminated stuff everywhere. And I don't even like taking my dog up there. And so we have that part closed. People are still going up there, but at their own risk. And that will be opening up as soon as it's done. We are hoping next summer. And then, yeah, there's one of those maps again. I think that was the same one. And we'll be coming back to some of those guys. All right, let's go to that next slide there. And this one is just a little bit of that background that I alluded to. There has been a heck of a lot of work up there. There was some of the abatement processes in the 80s and then in the 90s and then in 2000, you guys probably know that part a lot better than I do. I know Pedro does. And then in 2008, when they finally put it on that national register, that's when we did the big archaeological report. That's when everything was finally mapped that was up there. But think about that. Think about how much stuff we lost as archaeologists from when you'll hear about when it shut down with when Ciara talks to 2008. We lost a lot. But that is where archaeology comes in. And that is where the artifacts really are the showcase of this. As archaeologists, we are never working with a full deck of cards. We are always working with that itty bitty little shard of glass that nobody looted because it's a shard of glass. Funny enough, people are actually looting that now because they're making artwork out of it. So segue into my ARPA violation talk real quick. Do not take artifacts off of the National Forest. I don't bring these artifacts here to show you what you can loot off of the forest. I bring it so that we can educate, right? If you do want to loot and you choose to loot, the little PSA is that it is up to a $250,000 fine, 25 years in prison, and it's a felony. I am looking forward to giving somebody a felony one day, but I really hope it's nobody in this room, right? We don't want that. And I can remember a little bit of my background, and then I will introduce the real speaker. I am originally from Phillipsburg. And so I grew up in mining and tailing piles. I never got COVID, and I do think it's because I grew up in tailing piles. And I actually went up to Coolidge in 1994. I have a scar on my finger here from digging in a can dump. That it really excited me as this little fourth grader. I was beyond excited about digging in these cans, and I got yelled at by, I found out just a few years ago when I took this position, it was my current supervisor's dad, who was the forest archaeologist at that time. And he yelled at me and said, "Hey, you cannot dig in this can dump. This is illegal. And by the way, this is archaeology." And so that was the start of my archaeological background. I knew that this was the job that I had to go into. And then I graduated from elementary school and high school, and I went on to get 2 master's degrees, 2 bachelor's and 2 master's degrees, all with that emphasis in archaeology. And that whole time, I was actually working in tourism too, being that Phillipsburg is that tourism, one of the very first tourism communities, starting in the 90s. I grew up with that. I worked in that since I was 12. And so I have a deep appreciation for that. And that's exactly what Coolidge can do. And then the universe has this way of just bringing people together and making things happen. And lo and behold, the universe somehow put the 2 of us together. And I don't know if the universe understands what they've done yet. We have so many plans for Coolidge. Other plans also for the rest of Montana. We are going to just do awesome things. But Ciara is going to tell you guys the real story of Coolidge.
No, I think I pretty much have. Okay, I'll add with it. There's just a little bit here and there that I would agree. So Ayme just told you she was inspired to become an archaeologist when she went to Coolidge in 1994. I also went to Coolidge for the first time in 1994, which is a crazy coincidence. I'm from Wisconsin originally and moved out here as a rancher 20 years ago. And my actual college background is in writing and history. So I have combined that with my ranching career. In any case, I am here to tell you a little bit about the history of Coolidge, not so much the reclamation stuff that you guys already know, but the lives of the people who lived there. Ayme and I have been working on developing this new interpretive plan. Right now, when you go up there, you see a whole bunch of piles of stuff, right? Garbage, broken down buildings. There's very little standing, unfortunately. We're here to try and give everyone a perspective on what it was actually like to live there, to be in those shoes. We've developed what we're hoping to put into place is a 50-site walking tour where you'll be able to walk through town and get pictures of what this building actually looked like, who actually lived here, and the kinds of activities that were going on when it was a running town. So let's go ahead and move forward, if you don't mind, to the next slide. So first, I do want to discuss why Coolidge looks the way it does today. Unfortunately, it's had a number of strikes against it through its years. So through the 1950s, this is actually a picture of one of the caretakers who lived up at Coolidge for a very long time. There were caretakers up there that took care of the place for a long time. It was known as a secret ghost town in Montana because it was relatively unknown outside of the pioneers, and it was protected by the people who still lived and worked in the area. Unfortunately, after some strikes we'll get into in a minute here, it really became unprotected. And that was when people started to come up to salvage equipment, to take away buildings, entire buildings, and move them into other places. You'll see almost all of the outhouses in Coolidge are tipped over. That's not just because of weather. That's because people were searching for bottles underneath. So it's really been abused through the years. We're trying to preserve what's still there, reclaim what we can, and introduce it in a new light. Let's go ahead and go to the next one. Thank you. Okay, so we're going to go through the history relatively quickly so we can get to the cool stuff. Elkhorn is the main mine that Coolidge is known for, but it's certainly not the only one. There are lots and lots of claims, as you can see. It was discovered in 1873 by Mike Steele and F.W. Coolidge, and it was Bill Rowe who found the Elkhorns that literally gave it its name. It was primarily a silver camp from the 1870s to the 1890s. But in 1892, the government passed a law demonetizing silver, and that led to a drop in values. Camp was pretty much abandoned at that point. Over the next decade, silver prices picked back up. people started moving back into Coolidge to get that silver out again, starting in 1903-ish. Thank you. So then we have Mr. William R. Allen, who comes in here. William Allen was born in French Gulch, which is up Mill Creek. His father was in timber. They were both in mining, made quite a bit of money in the early years. And he was a booster, a promoter, a businessman. He was also a politician. He became the lieutenant governor of Montana in, I think, 1904. And this is a relatively common picture. Everybody liked him. He always had that unlit cigarette in his mouth. He was a big talker and just a gregarious guy, could convince you to buy into his dreams. He was the one that really looked at Elkhorn and said, there's something here. We can make something out of this. He bought about 1,600 acres of claims by 1911 and brought in a mining engineer by the name of S.W. Hall. Hall is famous in Butte circles, certainly. He was just a big name, the kind of guy that if you brought in and he told you this is going to be gold, you're going to stake your fortune on his claim. Really a respected man in the mining industries. And that's what he did. He came up to Elkhorn, spent 40 days looking over this 1,600 acres and said to Mr. Allen, the things that I'm seeing in the ground here look a lot like what I see underneath Butte. Underneath the Anaconda claim, Marcus Staley's big bonanza. And that convinced Allen to throw everything he had up at Elkhorn. Now, in order to get any of that ore out, it was a 3-day trek by horse and wagon from Coolidge to Divide. That's expensive and slow. So Allen decided to build a narrow gauge railroad running from Divide up to Coolidge. You can still see the tracks or the grade cut today. And we've got the 3 different sizes here. The regular gauge from Divide, the narrow gauge to Coolidge, and the little 4 tracks inside the mines. In any case, he built that railroad, financed it himself between 1916 and 1919, built a massive power structure, electricity, and telephone to get up to Coolidge as well. And then started working on the mill. This is where I need to read a little bit. Elkhorn, this is known as the Elkhorn Mill, not to be confused with Elkhorn Ghost Town over in Boulder County, just Jefferson County, whatever it is. This was the biggest silver mill in Montana. It covered more than 2 acres of ground under its roof. There were massive amounts of et cetera buildings all around it. You can see some of the water towers up here. That's a rail gauge and some boiler buildings in here. It had steam heat, a modern fire suppression system. It had an entirely gravity run system with 16 concentrating tables, 52 electric motors, a 2,500 square foot compressor, 2 crushers, 2 ball mills, and 4 classifying tables. It could recover 90 to 93% of the good stuff. So it could be really profitable. Over its lifespan, it milled about 47,000 tons of ore, which is vastly less than it could actually handle. It operated only about 7 months at full capacity. A financial depression hit 1920, 1921, and the stakeholders in the mill called back their money. The mill didn't open until 1922. There was no money to call back. So the company folded. It reorganized quickly. By 1925, they were back up to full capacity. Go back to the next one. And then in 1927, the dam washed out at Pattengale. It washed out 13 miles of the track that they needed to get the ore out of the way, out of the mountains. So at that point, it shut down again. They quickly reorganized, began rebuilding, seemed to have most of the tracks rebuilt by 1929, 1930, the Great Depression hit. At that point, Allen continued to have miners come up and work. Mostly they were taking the ore that had already been dug and selling it out. The guys were working for room and board at that point. He wasn't really even paying wages. And then it just never really recovered. There was a little bit of mining that continued to go on through the 40s. And within months of Allen's death in 1952, we have letters. He was still trying to sell that dream. He really believed that Elkhorn was going to be it. Unfortunately, he died and that did not happen. At that point, the caretaker continued to live there up and through maybe the early 1960s. And then salvagers started to come in legally and illegally. Most of the equipment within the mill was scrapped all through the late 60s and 70s. By 1980, the front of the mill had been completely removed, sold. It became a restaurant in Idaho Falls, I believe. And then into the mid 90s when the mill was dismantled entirely. But now we get to the fun stuff. The people who actually live there. Forget the depressing. So you can see Coolidge down here. Coolidge was one main street facing the mill. Its heyday lasted only from 1921 to 1929 at best. Max 300 people at any given time. It took about 200 miners to run the mill and the mine in conjunction. And then there were about 100 workers and family that lived up there as well. According to the census data we do have, those residents were mostly male, which isn't a big surprise. There's not exact numbers during that time, but probably 60 to 70% men, entirely white. There are no historical data that says that there was ever a person of color who lived up there. They were only 50 to 60% US citizens. There was a lot of immigrants though. Majority were from Nordic countries, a handful from Italy and England and Ireland as well. And then there were about 20 to 30 children. It was a company town. The company built what they needed, right? They built some houses, they built some infrastructure, but they didn't really build to take care of a community. So there wasn't a lot to do. You can see this letter from Harry Rentz, who was a miner up there building the mill. To that end, the Ripleys, father and son, built this building behind the folks there. That was the pool hall. That was the only building for amusement in all of Coolidge. It does not exist today. I don't know who removed it, but it's been entirely removed. That pool hall was quite a place because there were 3 shifts running in the mill. It was open almost 24 hours a day. There was no liquor available in Coolidge. There was apparently a still in the hills, but you'd have to know who to buy it from and where, of course, that was. There were no single women in Coolidge. There were not allowed to be single women in Coolidge. If a married woman wanted to ride the train from Wise River up alone, she had to carry a written permission slip from her husband. The only single woman allowed in town was the school teacher, and she was strictly forbidden from fraternizing with men unchaperoned. The pool hall, let's see. It was the primary hangout spot. They kept a large bankroll on hand so that when payday came around, the miners didn't have to go all the way out to town to cash their paychecks. They could just come to the pool hall, cash a paycheck right there and go to playing. One night they closed, or morning, they closed up at 3 a.m. in 1925. And the sun came back at 6 a.m. to reopen for the next shift of miners. And there was dynamite on the floor and the cash drawer was empty. Several men had come in that little tiny 3-hour stretch, knowing that it was going to be payroll. They had $1,600 of cash on hand. They had brought the dynamite to blow the safe, but the Ripleys hadn't even locked the safe. It was just sitting there. So they left with the cash and it was never seen again. So the primary social center where women and children were allowed was the schoolhouse. I do want to point out for those of you who have been up there, this building on the right is usually identified as the schoolhouse. That is not the schoolhouse. The schoolhouse is a flat platform, quite a large flat platform, but unless you know where it is, it's hard to identify as a schoolhouse today. That's a photo from 1968 when the front cupola was still standing. So the schoolhouse was, let's see, the district was created in 1918 and abandoned in 1937. It served about 25 children, and it was where everybody came for all the other social activities, socially acceptable activities. There was voting, of course. There were lectures. There were school children programs and sing-alongs. They bring the radio down and have dances frequently. Those dances were usually attended by folks from Wise River as well. They'd send a special train down to pick up some fresh meat and bring them on back up to Coolidge for the dance. You can go ahead and do that. There was the Big Hole Basin News had a column from Coolidge for quite some years. So you can see some of the activity. The mine foreman brought up and installed his radio so they could all dance to Los Angeles music. This one, if any of you are familiar with kind of 1920s Moors, that was quite a risky thing to say. Wives are wives who let their husbands come to Coolidge unattended on dance nights. We cannot possibly be responsible for stolen or damaged property. You can go ahead to the next one. So there were a whole bunch of kids in camp, and kids can make their own fun anywhere, of course. Animals feature big in all the accounts that I've gotten of children up there. Lambs and kittens, horseback rides from the Miner up here, fishing, that's from a trip to Odell Lake. This was a dog named Prince. Buckholz was her name, now that I should remember it. Up here, I think that these kids are carrying water from the creek. In the winter, the pipes would freeze into town. So none of the houses had plumbing in the winter, and they would just go to the mill to shower. You can go ahead to the next one. And the women would make social clubs. So they organized the Alta Vista Club, which was a mountain climbing club. They would all get together and scale peaks. The ski club was super popular. They would teach everybody to ski. There were lots of winter injuries reported. And the housewives had a crafting club where they'd go house to house and make some fun, unique craft. They wove Easter baskets as centerpieces. They told each other's horoscopes, those kinds of things. Another popular event was hosting dinner, inviting one single miner who was on his way up in the company and inviting the school teacher in case there were storms. So we can go to the next one. There was also, this is the ore tramway from the upper camp, which is about 900 feet higher than the mill. Along with this ore tramway, there was a log chute. They would cut the timber and send it down to the creek where it could be milled into boards at the sawmill. I think it was probably started by miners, but adopted by kids. They would go to the cookhouse, steal the big fry pans, and ride the log chute down into town. This photo right here is William Allen's wife and his oldest daughter, and he caught her when she was 7 years old doing that. She's in a big trouble. You can go ahead to the next one. So now we're going to go take a quick look at what's in town today. Like I said, Ayme and I have been developing an interpretive tour. We've got about 50 sites that I'd like to have signage on so that everybody can understand. I'm just going to highlight a few of them that you might be familiar with. Go ahead. The first one's probably the most recognizable site in Coolidge. This house is the most structurally sound of any house in Coolidge, and it's the Tyro house. Frank Tyro was hired in about 1923. He was the postmaster and the comptroller and mine manager for a while, a very important guy to William Allen and the running of the mine. In 1924, Muriel Paddock, the Paddock family of Bannock and the Big Hole, she came up to teach school. And within 3 months, Frank and her ran off to Butte to get married. So Frank moved her into this house right here. And they raised 2 little girls there. He finally left in 1929 after the biggest collapse of the company. And they moved to Dillon, where they ran an implement dealership for a while, and then moved around and ended up in the Flathead. This house was also used as the caretaker's house for many years after Coolidge was abandoned. That's one of the reasons it remains in such good condition. Another reason is there have been volunteer groups that have gone up with the cooperation of the Forest Service to help keep it in structurally sound condition, which is something that we'd like to look at doing again in the future, which we'll touch on at the end of this here. You can go ahead to the next one. This building behind the Tyro house has been called a still. It has been called a ice house through the years, but we're pretty certain that it was actually a sauna. 25% of Coolidge's population was from Nordic countries, where sauna use was really common. The walls are about 1 foot thick and they're insulated with sawdust. And inside there's a couple of beds, a great big barrel stove that was used to heat the interior. So you have to imagine in those long winter nights, a bunch of stinky miners sitting around in their underwear in the sun. You can go into the next one. We're going to revisit. Oh, skipped one. Okay. So we know it's not the schoolhouse. Does anybody know what it is? Or want to guess at what it is?
Church.
Oh, good call, but no church.
Okay. So there is a little bit of argument about this. I'm pretty convinced of my position, but I'll give you both. Biz Patterson, who was William Allen's oldest daughter, recalled later on the meat house. It's also called the spring house. It was built over the creek because this was pre-refrigeration in many cases. They didn't want to use the energy they did have for a refrigerator. And they needed at least 4 full cows a week to feed the miners up there. So they needed a big area to hang meat and keep it cold. This was over the creek, so it would take the cold air from that cold water. There also would have been a channel cut into the creek where you could put your dairy to keep that cold. And then there would have been shelves for vegetables and fruit along the walls. The entire thing, you can see if you walk up there today, under these boards that are rotting away, it's all screened to keep bugs out. And then it has this cupola to let the ventilation work. Now, on an early archaeological report, this was reported as a pump house for a water pump. But there are 2 other pump house sites that still exist in Coolidge. So I personally don't think that's correct. I'm gonna go with Biz on this one and say that is a meat house. I think it's probably one of the most photographed spots in Elkhorn, however. And now we're gonna look at the mill. So you were talking earlier about stabilizing the concrete. These are the concrete arches. This is when the mill just opened in 1921, and these are those same concrete arches that they're going to be stabilizing today. The interpretive trail that we're planning, provided everything goes as planned, would go right through the middle of this, in front of these, on its way up the side. So you'd be seeing both this view and this view following that interpretive tour. You can go ahead to the next one. This is another view. This is actually the mill under construction in 1921. It's funny because it looks pretty similar to that in its current condition.
Yeah.
And then this is the complete, that trail would be right through this center section where the lowest roof is across the assay house. I'll go ahead there. There are a number of ore chutes that still remain up there that we'd want to be marking. This one is from the upper tramway down. This is a 1920s photo of it actually in operation. I'll go ahead through that one. This is the assay office, or the remains of one of the assay offices. There were probably 3 mill offices up at any given time. One was next door to the Tyro house where he ran the post office and the payroll. This one is just off the mill, still standing. It's where they did the majority of the concentrating of the ore to test and see if any given load was worth sending out to be concentrated. And that's a great photo from the Patterson collection. Posed businessman signing something important. This is the stables. These are 2 massive piles of collapsed wood today, but they were integral to the operation of the mines. That railroad that came through was very important when it ran. And there was lots of times when it didn't. The snow would blow over the tracks and they couldn't get the speeder up. The grass would grow too thick. And the wheels wouldn't catch on the rails. There were mechanical troubles. They just had plain old breakdowns. Horses tended to be more reliable. There were a few personal automobiles up in Coolidge, but for the most part, horses did the work. You can see this massive ore wagon. There's 3 wagons back here pulled by 10 horses coming out. And then they also used mules to haul the carts as well. Okay, so there's a few things up there that we haven't quite figured out yet. I invite any of you to tell me what the heck these things are. This is a picture of just after the mine was built. It was a promotional photo showing the giant wheel thingy. But what did it do? I don't know. Go ahead to the next one. Same with this. Okay, truck, maybe a compressor of sorts, some kind of electrical pump. If anyone has a clue, hey, pass it on. Go ahead to the next one. Oh, this one is a great mystery. Over by the boiler, there is a mysterious pile of metal that was clearly laminated together with those teeth in a line at one point, all delammed over the years. But why? Who is it for? I think there's one more. My favorite. This is a random box. It is probably 24 feet long by 6 feet wide. It appears like it wants to be a chimney, like it was originally standing up with two big vents. Maybe hot air went up, but because it's bored like that, it wasn't like a furnace chimney. Oh, there's another one. So there's still more research to do. We're always discovering new as we look and able to confirm or deny new things. Like we have been able to confirm there was no church in Coolidge. That's important. We're digging up new memories, new relatives that have never been spoken with before and taking their accounts and collaborating. Really been helpful to forming a much clearer picture of the people who lived up in Coolidge. Okay, and now here's where we need assistance. If anyone would happen to know people who did have relatives,
Done.
even up through the 1960s operations, that would be really helpful for us to talk with them, help identify some of these things. Ayme and I are also working on how we can engage the visitor. I've been up there quite a lot doing all of these surveys, and invariably I run into all kinds of people who are very excited about the ghost town they're walking through, even though there's not really much to see but piles of rubble. And the vast majority of those people are bringing people back year after year. This is a highlight of their trip, but they know nothing about it. It continually baffles me when I speak to them. It was some silver mining town and that's it. So we want to give these people a better understanding of what was happening here by giving them some ownership over a story, over a lifespan that will help them see how this site and the damaging parts of it are affecting life today. Why the road is where it is, why the fish populations are what they are, how these past lives are influencing their lives today. So that is something, I think there's one more slide, which is just our contact info. And here's where I'm going to bring you back up. Yeah, we are hoping to develop a similar volunteer effort to what we have going on in Garment. Is that right? Do you want to know about this?
Yeah, you guys are probably familiar with the Friends of the Forest groups. There's the Friends of the Bitterroot, that one's a pretty popular one, where there's just a group of citizens that get together and they have their own system and the Forest Service steps out of it. And they then get a plan and find some funding and bring that to the Forest Service and say, hey, this is what we want to do. And then me as that contact person, I'd be like, yep, that's actually something that we could do according to the NHPA and all of our archaeology laws. It's something that Ciara has agreed to spearhead, being the, I know we are so dangerous together. And actually pause that story because I was sitting over there trying not to shout this out. You said that the building in the creek that everybody thinks is a pump house.
Yeah.
She called it a spring house.
I need help.
But was the other word a spring house?
Yes.
That's exactly why archaeologists that were not trained as historical archaeologists like me thought it was a pump house because.
Oh.
What's that? Yeah. So they just, the colloquial term just misplaced them. Anyways, so see, we're unstoppable. Right?
Told you I saw a girlfriend. I haven't seen the blonde Barbie doll yet. I think she's gone. I haven't seen Angie. Jean's boy.
Do they need an archaeologist to find the blonde Barbie doll? It's pretty good at this stuff.
Good call.
Yeah. So yeah, we're really just in the beginning phases of that and think about if you guys want to be involved in that, if you have friends or family that want to be involved in it. I have grand plans of this place and I have since I was in 4th grade. And one thing that I love to do is do those interp tours. And I really want to highlight her research on this because people have been looking at Coolidge now for, I could confidently say 30 years to look for a history of Coolidge, and they have fallen flat every single time. Ciara has found those photos that you guys saw. You're the first public members to see those photos. She has found these photos, these stories, these newspaper clippings, these objects that nobody has heard or seen in a century. That is huge, and that is the importance of these types of connections and collaborations, and essentially the friends groups and friendships too, but that kind of gets a little cheesy.
Yeah, I guess I have to point out, thank you to the Millers for some of those photographs, which are really helpful, and for a number of these artifacts as well. I hope that you guys will have a chance to come up and take a look at what we've got on the table. Most of it is from Coolidge. There's a few pieces from similar mining towns. But these are the kind of things that we're trying to save and that we're still discovering every time we're up there. What kind of questions or ideas do you have for us?
Is there a story behind the name of Coolidge?
Yes, there is. So Alan,
Like Grundy.
yes. The mining camp prior to Alan's involvement was known as Grundy for a pioneer lumberman.
Henry Grundy.
Henry Grundy, thank you. He was a pioneer timberman, I believe mostly from Bannock, right?
He started in Bannock, yeah, he ended up in Butte. He's also had the first sawmill on Mill Creek over at Anaconda.
And there's some weird connections to the Allen family there, but I'm not gonna
Yes,
go
there
into
is.
that. When Allen took over all of that, he was a Coolidge booster for President Coolidge prior to Coolidge actually getting the appointment. There is some old wives' tales that he was trying to convince Coolidge to invest in the Boston Montana Company, but there's no evidence that Coolidge actually did. Allen was a delegate to the Republican National Convention. He and Coolidge knew one another. There was definitely that connection. I think Allen just did it as a fangirl thing. He was trying to get a little extra money in. So
Were there any disasters up there and did people ever get really sick? Was there a hospital?
no hospital, no doctor that lived there full time. There were some injuries, some pretty severe, within both the mill construction and the mining, the hard rock mining. None, my research, I haven't turned up any deaths that were absolutely attached to the mill or the mine. There were a couple of other prospectors in the area who took their own life, who drowned in the river, those kinds of things, but nothing major in camp. There were a couple of flu epidemics, but again, it was such a small population, nobody passed away. The most tragic and honestly, one of the most interesting stories that we uncovered was a woman who was, let's see here, I don't remember her name, do you? Yeah, unfortunately, I didn't bring it because it's a little salacious. She was committed to the Warm Springs State Asylum from Coolidge after she had become what they would call a despondent housewife. She spent the rest of her life there at Warm Springs, which was just another 4 or 5 years, and she died of syphilis. And syphilis makes you, advanced syphilis, there is some elements of psychosis that go along with that. Her husband stayed in Coolidge, immediately remarried an 18-year-old. He was like 42, and he died young. And that's something that I'm interested in. Look, I haven't had the time to, but I'm going to investigate a little bit further. My bet is he also died of syphilis, and he also gave it to his new wife. That's the most salacious death. It's not a lot of this research.
Is there any other known settlement in Montana that didn't have a saloon or a church?
That's a great
That's a really good question. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
well, Bronco, not allowed.
Yeah, it's funny, I worked for BLM for a summer and I was the park ranger archaeologist up at Garnet Ghost Town. And same time period, and we had a bunch of oral histories from the children that grew up there. And the oral histories were done in the 80s and 90s. And every single one of them said, oh no, there was never anything like a brothel up there. And oh no, there was never gambling. And we always just had such a good time, but it was the child's memory. Like they wouldn't necessarily understand what that was. Lo and behold, like I'm up there doing a tour and I see the sparkly in the dirt and I reach down and it's a bottle stopper. And it's a holy water stopper right behind the one bar that was known to be the brothel. Yeah, and so we know that went on up there, and that's where archaeology does come in, because we might not have those historical documents or those written records or even oral stories. But that's when we can get an artifact assemblage and a historical archaeologist can look at it and we can either confirm, contradict, or contribute to that story that way. So even maybe in the future, we do another archaeological excavation up there. We were actually talking about that with the potential duplex.
Yeah.
And she's like, how the heck are we gonna find that? And I was like, objects, material goods.
Something else Amy pointed out is there's not a ton of glass up there. We know there were bottle collectors that were hunting the bottles, but there's still, the vast majority of the trash is tin. That points to that still in the hills. That many of those intact bottles may have been taken up the hills to be used at the still and did not survive in the trash dumps outside their windows, because they just didn't get thrown out in that same way. That's a theory we have yet to prove, but.
Yeah, the absence of artifacts is just as telling for sure, especially in these parts of Montana. I've worked on several sites that I'm looking around and all we see are just fragments of metal and we see no glass, we see no ceramic. And next thing I come across some pipes and then there's the boiler. And I'm like, well, here we go. They were producing some booze up here. It's pretty popular all around Butte too, that there's no glass bottles in the woods.
Other questions?
So where are you going next with this
That's up to the money people.
marketing? You've been to the archives, haven't you?
Yes, yeah, expensive help from there.
And is there going to be like a Saturday thing that the Grange does?
So at this point, short-term, long-term plan is to get, we have to wait for the reclamation work to be finished so that the mill side can be reopened. And we can put the interpretive tour plan in place. Using that to help build momentum for this Friends of Coolidge opportunity. And then go from there, then take it to the archives with a brown bag lunch lecture rather, obviously start a Facebook page. We have already had a number of people contact us who say they're absolutely interested in volunteering, both in some reconstruction efforts and just in being up there once a month to say, hey, you can't take that, or hey, did you know that this was?
I don't think people knew what this was gonna be. We should have had 4 times, 2 times.
We can come back.
We can talk for hours about it.
That's-
You just invite us. You got our contact information right there.
Is it possible to email me that presentation?
Yeah,
That'd be
sure.
awesome. Thank you.
Sure thing.
So is there currently I don't know, it's one of the older claims or a claim right there in that Mono Creek area that's currently being mined?
All of the mining claims are still active. I think it's the upper mine that's currently under contract. So the adit that is across from the mill there, 1/4 mile or whatever, that one is for sale.
Aren't they hauling ore from one of them areas that somebody was talking about?
That's up on that upper one.
Yeah, up from and the upper one is not part of the historic site.
Okay.
Yeah, and so it hasn't been part of this survey. I do have a bunch of photos of it and we'll include that in all of our efforts, but technically it's not as protected as town.
What is your process like when you find an artifact? What's the next step you do?
Yeah, I do not collect artifacts. It's very rare, I should say, that I collect artifacts. This is a piece of the floor in the Tyrell Homes. We could pass this guy around too. And I did collect that one because I knew that one was gonna walk off, but I also knew that we were gonna be doing this, and so it was something that I could use as a teaching tool. But most of the time, I don't collect them because it takes a lot of funding to curate objects properly. We, on the Beaverhead Deer Lodge, we are our own curation facility, so my office is our curation facility, and anybody is welcome to come look at it. Again, you have my contact information and I can show you artifacts. When we do collect things, we catalog them, and with that, it's just writing up that description, giving it a number and making it traceable, collecting that provenance of it. But most of the time, and particularly, and this is another PSA moment because I don't often get this, but particularly pre-contact objects. There are projectile points everywhere on federal land, and I don't even collect them. When I see them, I pick them up, I admire them, I love them, I take a photo of them, I do document the location of it. And then I poke it back into the ground. I thank it, and then I poke it back into the ground. And that was really hammered into me in my early Archie days, almost 20 years ago now, over on the Northern Cheyenne Reservation. And I was staying with a man named Linwood Tallbull. And he says, why do you white people always want to collect my artifacts or my ancestors' tools? And I was like, because they're artifacts, Linwood, and they're cool. And like, we can learn stuff from them. He goes, yeah, when my ancestors made those tools, part of their soul went into them. And I don't like the idea of my ancestors' tools in your pockets in your drawers. It's not like the idea of them in my pockets and drawers either. We don't need more people in there. And so I don't collect. I work very closely with all of the tribes and I let them know. And sometimes they say, actually, we would like to collect that, or we would like you to collect that. And then I do, but most of the time they say, thank you. We don't need to be bringing that stuff back up, so.
We try to protect the stuff that's gonna be stolen though.
Right, yeah.
And Mister, what is this?
It's a piece of linoleum from the 1920s from inside Frank Tyro's house.
Oh, cool.
One of the other photos that she found is a photo of inside the Allen's house at Coolidge in the 1920s. We have very few photos inside houses anywhere, let alone a town that barely existed. It's absolutely incredible. Yeah, she did a fantastic job.
There's still lots out there to be found.
When we put the minutes out, we'll ask for, if anybody has photos,
That'd be great.
ask them to send them.
Thank you.
I don't know if anything will come of it, but
Yeah, you never know who's got a connection to who.
yeah.
Thank you all very much for hosting us tonight. So we could tell you a little bit.
You two are definitely very dangerous together, and I can't wait to keep working on this Elkhorn site and keep bringing you reclamation type of money so you can work your magic on the artifacts.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, that was so interesting. Thank you so much.
We're waiting on here.
All right. So you're all are welcome to stick around and look at the artifacts. Just so you know, we don't meet in December. So January is our annual governing board meeting. So our next meeting here will be February 18th, and we'll be learning about mountain lions from FWB. That's all I've got. Thanks for coming. Oh, yeah, and if anyone would like to help us put the chairs and tables away, that would be great. Thank you.
Oh.